Hi, everyone. It's Dr. Z, and welcome to another episode of Next Up Narcissism. Today, we have somebody who I just adore and think is hilarious, Nicki Marie. For those of you who don't know Nicki Marie, she calls herself, which I think is amazing, an accidental influencer, which we talk about in this episode. Nicki Marie is a divorced mom of 2 kids, podcast host, and social media influencer who speaks openly about her mental health struggles, parenting struggles, and single motherhood. She pretty much says everything that we're feeling, but that we don't say out loud. And for that reason, she's super relatable. I think you're going to enjoy this episode. It is packed full of just everyday stuff that we go through, everything from parenting to divorce to narcissistic personality disorder to dating. Just a really relatable episode. I think you're going to get a lot from. I hope you enjoy it. Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Next Up Narcissism. Today, I am with the amazing Nicki Marie, and as she stated earlier, the accidental influencer, which I absolutely love, which we'll get into. But thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited for this conversation, and that's what it's going to be, just a conversation. I have a ton of questions for you. You have a ton of questions for me, so let's just start. So I'll hand it over to you. Just kind of tell everyone who you are and how you are an accidental influencer and what you accidentally influence.
Dr. Z, thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here. I actually found you on Instagram and you were a podcast guest and I saw you talking about narcissism. I'm like, I have so many questions. So accidental influencer is because I was a senior lean-in vice president of a large brand, took my job so seriously. You know, those people that like emotionally are invested in their job.
Yeah.
And then they realize that the job is not emotionally invested in them.
Yes.
So my feelings got hurt in business so many times. And then I started consulting.
It's a really good reframe. I love that. Nobody says it like that
before. I've never said it before. So lock it in here. I just felt like replaceable. And I didn't think I was. And then I went and I started consulting. And then I went through a separation of my marriage and then came COVID. So it was like this medley of dysfunction, shit showness, where my life went from like white picket fence, perfect house, perfect family, to like divorce, starting over, COVID, home with 2 kids who could not, go to school or daycare. And bottom of the barrel really brought me into the most beautiful era of my life, which was like, I was back to my like middle school self. Goofy, silly, unapologetic because I didn't have any clients to worry about.
Yep.
And I went onto TikTok to figure out the app because I was a consultant and my brands were asking me, created a fake name, Nicki Unplugged. I don't even know what it means to this day. And just started having fun and being truthful about life and motherhood as a like funny adult. And it caught on fast. And
because you're so relatable. You say what people are thinking. You say it out loud, and it's great.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong. And I say what I want to say in the moment, and it doesn't mean I don't go back and challenge myself. I'm never trying to be an expert. I'm never thinking I'm right.
Well, you're an expert on you.
Well, not even that. I'm not an expert on anything. I'm curious as a cat. That's about it.
I think it's great. And, one of the things that you said that I find interesting, and I tell this to a lot of my patients, especially those who are coming in with relationship difficulties, let's say, and I always warn them ahead of time, and you made the change with work and then it affected the other things, but I'll have people that'll come in and they want to make this drastic change in a boundary or something within their family. And I give them warning ahead of time. Just be mindful that it is not an isolated change. You change one thing, everything in your system is going to get disrupted, not in a bad way, but it's going to shift. And so I warn people ahead of time that, friends that you were friends with before you shifted may not be your friends, and your relationship may take a turn, or you may decide you just want to quit your job and find someone else once you figure out who you are, once those kind of self-confident boundaries are in place. And so when I hear you say, I realized I was replaceable. And when you realize you're replaceable after thinking you're invincible, it is it's a blow. It's a blow to the ego for sure. You realize you are just as vulnerable as everybody else. And that changes your outlook. And then from that, it spreads in all other areas,
Oh yeah.
So,
and I love that you said this, it's like an isolated change. This is 7 years of work.
Yep.
And I've never given myself credit for that. 7 years of work and self growth and self love. And
easier to work in the corporate world than do that. That's my opinion.
But when people see where I've gotten to, it's easy to say, I want to do that. Or look, she did that and it made it look easy. No. This was like a year over year down in the dumps. I can't tell you how many videos I found in my phone, Dr. Z, of me documenting my divorce, crying my fucking eyes out in my car. Those weren't for public. Those weren't for public posting. Those were for my own, please never forget what you went through moments. Those are in here. I can't even watch them.
I actually I tell a lot of my patients to do that, to document, not just, I mean, I have a biased sample. I see people that are going through horrific divorces in family court, but what I tell them regardless is that document these breakdown moments. Usually they're in the car. Document these breakdown moments because I want them to be anchor points for them to be able to go back and see how far they've come, because we are the worst reporters of our previous behavior. And we forget how low we were. We forget how much we work to get through something. We forget that we've been successful at things. And so to document these moments just for the sake of using them as anchor points in your life really helps ground you. And it helps you see, at least in your case, how far you've come. Not that you don't have days that aren't shit right now. I mean, like we look at the first 5 minutes. I mean, like shit happens, but I think acknowledging that you've had those moments and knowing that you are further along than you were, that's all you need to know. That's all you need to know.
Yes. Yes. And that's a lot of women will be in my DMs and asking me things that are so personal to them. And I can't believe I'm in this space where people want me on it. I get choked up thinking about it.
It's like a privilege.
Yes. And just remembering having to do co-parenting drop-offs for the first time and exchanges. Like I have a visceral reaction just thinking back to how it felt at the beginning versus like where I've gotten to. And that's a message that I need everyone to hear is it's going to be hard. It's going to be the worst feeling you've ever had, but you've got to work through it. So I think divorce is a big topic that I get asked about. Co-parenting. There's a lot of women right now, Dr. Z, that feel like they are in a horrible marriage and they don't know how to get out. Correct. And I know that's not technically our topic today, but it's just, we're in this space, I think, of awareness in a way that we've never been.
And I think part of it is even I always say this, even relationships that are not narcissistic, which are the ones I tend to deal with, even in just plain old fashioned unhealthy marriages that aren't abusive. That's like I hate being a pessimist, but that's really, I see so much of that. And yes, are people happy? Of course they're happy. But I think our perspective on marriage, it has to shift. And I think it's shifting. And I'm not saying people shouldn't get married. What I'm saying is you have to go into it with these realistic expectations. It's not this, and I say this all the time, Disney has absolutely screwed up our minds. We think that it's going to be this, like you look at Cinderella, she fell in love and he found her shoe and now they're happily married. Beauty and the Beast, she fell in love with the guy who kidnapped her and locked her in a castle. But Snow White, she's getting kissed when she's sleeping. I mean, there's so many things with Disney that it makes you think that the goal is this fairy tale romance. It doesn't exist. I'm sorry, it just doesn't. And so
I'm laughing because I literally sent to my mom last night. I watched Just Go With It with Adam Sandler and Jennifer Aniston.
Yeah.
On Netflix. Yeah. And I was like, that's the type of guy. That's the type of guy.
Exactly. Look at Frozen. I had to watch Frozen 9 million times with my daughters. But one time I'm watching it and my son, he was young at the time, we're all watching it. And they fell in love and wanted to get married because they said the same word. They knew each other for an hour. And I have my little girls watching this and I'm looking at them. I'm like, oh my God. And I was like, God, this is why we're all in these situations, because of this stuff, right? And so I know people are listening going, oh my God, it's just Disney, relax, it's a cartoon. It is, but it's so ingrained in our society. And this is where those, so I think it's more, back to my original point before I got off course, I think it's our job to manage our expectations. I think it's our job to acknowledge what our limitations are and what our partner's limitations are, and make sure that you're okay with them, instead of thinking you need to constantly get to this place of perfect happiness and stay there. A mood should never be a goal, because it's a moving target. A goal is a behavior. Did I do it? Yes or no? Because I could be in a great mood and then go to log in and my mic's not working, my headphones aren't working, I spilled my coffee in the process, and like, now great, right? So I think it's important that people manage their expectations in relationships. I think that's the basis of all of it to start with. And I think for a long time, I think it's getting better now, but I think for a long time we all just totally missed the mark on that.
Yeah, and I get what you're saying, and then my brain also goes into like, how much does our upbringing, have to do with it, and how much does change have to do with it? Because my ex-husband and I once worked really well.
Until
We
someone
worked
shifted.
really well together until there was a shift in careers.
Yes.
So everybody thinks like it's the babies, it's the shift in career.
Listen, it could be, but it's not
right
for you. Yeah.
Right. Well, there are different things that are like tipping points, and I don't think we're prepared for that. We're sold this, right, this marriage and everything works now because you guys are attracted to each other.
Yes.
You both have the same goals, but you don't react the same way to life.
You don't know how and that's the risk you take. You don't know when someone loses their job and now you can't pay your bills. How are you both going to handle that? Well, that's going to depend on your upbringing and your coping skills. You don't know that, and that's really, that's critical. And so and here's the thing. Sometimes it's just nobody's fault. I mean, sometimes it's just not what you signed up for initially. And either you can try to make it work or you don't.
Right. And what's comfortable is like, all of a sudden he's got a promotion and he's traveling the country 4 days a week and you're home with the kids.
Yeah.
Or vice versa. You're leaning in and you're getting the raise and you're getting all these accolades and he's still the same place in his career. There's so many dynamics.
Speaking of that, I just watched the Whitney Houston documentary.
Oh, yes. I haven't seen it yet.
Oh, and one of the things that started there were so many variables, but one of the things that started the downfall of their marriage was that she became bigger than him. Because when they first met, she wasn't. And when she kind of just broke through to being one of the most famous singers in the world, it affected their marriage. He didn't want her to get ahead of him. That's not what he had signed up for. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, it was how he treated her was horrible. I'm not saying that it was a reason, but that you could see that was the pivotal point where it started to shift, where the drugs started, where the abuse started. And so, like you said, sometimes it's the kids, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's career.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So leading into like the narcissism thing, it is everywhere. Everybody's talking about this term. So I hope you don't mind. I'm going to put it on you for a few questions. Like being online, the accidental influencer thing, I started seeing all these. I was like on narcissistic TikTok. My For You page was all narcissism and manipulation and gaslighting. Yeah. And so talk like, where are these people coming from? And is it all men? Is it some women? Like, I want to know, I want to learn from you.
Yeah. So I think at least my perception of this is that, excuse me, during COVID, everybody was home. And the only way people were really interacting with other people was through social media, even though that's normally how we interact anyway, but it really just, we couldn't go anywhere. We couldn't see anyone. So everybody was on social media because it was their form of communication, right? And we as human beings, we need to interact with people. So that was the first part. Second part was now you have situations where all the kids are home all the time with both parents.
Yeah.
Okay. In a healthy marriage, that's difficult right there. Just that alone. I'm trying to have sessions with patients. My kids are sticking their fingers under the door. My husband's doing a meeting somewhere upstairs. I mean, it was an absolute disaster. And, it is what it is. And so that's where that social piece came in. In addition to that, with people being home, now if there is an abusive dynamic in the household, you have both people home all the time. People are dying, losing their jobs. Substance abuse rates go through the roof. So what also happened was domestic violence rates went through the roof. Nobody could leave the house to go to work. Nobody could leave the house to go to a friend's house. You were home. You were stuck with your abuser. The only outlet you had was social media. That was it. And I cannot tell you, I mean, my best friend pulled up in my driveway and said, I'm out. I need to find an apartment. I mean, and that's just in my personal world. Forget my patients. People were getting divorced and separating because that was their turning point and they couldn't live in that abuse. So take that, couple it with social media. You have people starting to share their stories. You have people starting to look for help because now it's nonstop. And so I think what happened was people started sharing their stories. They realized that they weren't alone because especially with narcissistic abuse, it makes you feel so batshit crazy that you are so ashamed and embarrassed and nervous and lack confidence to even begin to tell somebody. You can't explain it to somebody because you can't even put your finger on what it is. And you don't even want to talk about it because you don't even know where to start. And so when people started seeing these stories and they're going, oh my God, wait, that's me. Wait, that's my story. And they started connecting and these communities started to develop online. And then people started searching out more kind of mental health professional help. And I think that's what started happening. That's when things started getting really big. That's when I started doing workshops because I realized, oh my God, there's such a need for this because up until then, the way I addressed it was people would come into my office, mostly women. They would tell me, my husband, and I see mostly women. Women are absolutely narcissistic, but in my experience in my office at the time, I was just seeing women. They would come in and they would describe the same narcissistic blueprint ever. And so I worked with them through that way. They didn't realize it was narcissism they were dealing with, but now on social media, now they know.
Yeah. So what, because we've all been with or worked for or been ourselves assholes.
Sure.
Who are like, I just think of when you're done with a relationship, you feel bad about it, but you're done and you end it. And I feel like online we're turning this whole term into like anybody who doesn't want to be with you anymore.
Correct.
And shuts you out is a narcissist.
Correct.
So can you clear it up for like, what is a narcissist versus what's an asshole? What's an egomaniac?
Yes.
Because in my take, these are like completely different things.
They are. So I always say all narcissists are assholes, but not all assholes are narcissists. So there's my blanket statement. But so here's the thing that I think people don't understand. And this is why I cringe when people who don't understand the nuances of narcissism start. It's one thing to share your story. I always say that survivor stories do more for people than I ever could, period.
Mm-hmm.
But when you start trying to give advice with no behavioral training and the nuances of like reinforcement and all that nerdy stuff, you can do more damage than good. So the thing with narcissism, and we're talking about it in the context of narcissistic personality disorder. Okay. It's on a continuum. Yes. And I'll get to that, what it means to have narcissistic features and things. But when we're talking about narcissistic personality disorder, when you say somebody is a narcissist, you assume it's narcissistic personality disorder. And a personality disorder, whether it's borderline personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, obsessive compulsive personality disorder, which is different than OCD, it is a pervasive style of interacting with the world in terms of how you relate to the world and how you relate to other people. You are not just like that with one person. You are like this with everybody in every domain. Now, that doesn't mean if you're a narcissist, you're going to be an asshole with everybody. That means that your template of viewing the world, your mindset is housed in this construct of narcissism. So if I need to get something from you, and let's say we're doing this podcast, right? And I need to get something from you. I don't know. I don't even know. I want your mailing list. I want your mailing list, right? Or I want you to like, just give me all the names. I would be doing this podcast. Please, those listening, I'm not doing it for that reason. I would be doing this podcast with the sole purpose of getting your mailing list, right? And so I will come, I'm not going to be an asshole to you. I am going to be so kind, so generous, so cooperative, and really kind of side with you and say, oh, you're such a genius for how you did your mailing list. Tell me how you did it. I look at you as like a mentor. And so I'm doing this, but I'm not an asshole. I look like I'm really sweet. And so it looks like maybe I'm just an asshole to one person, but no, I am doing all of this in the context of narcissistic personality disorder. It just looks different with different people. So you can be an asshole, but you're being an asshole, let's say, because you didn't get enough sleep, you didn't eat enough, you just fought with your spouse, or you just lost your job, or you're drunk, or whatever the case may be. There is a reason why you're being an asshole. With a narcissist, if they're being an asshole, if they're being kind, if they're being generous, they're not being an asshole, kind, and generous. You have to look at the function of why they're doing it. So am I being kind? Or you have to look at the function. Why at this very moment is Dr. B, right? That's where I'm at. Dr. Z being so kind to you. You have to look at the underlying reason. And when you find that, that's going to be the indicator of whether you're dealing with a narcissist or not, across all the situations, not just one. So it's not just an isolated event. It's not one isolated event of being an asshole or just being miserable human being to be around. It's more than that. The function of a narcissist is always going to be to gain control and manipulate and get power over somebody else. Everything they do, whether it's being nice, whether it's being helpful, whether it's being an asshole, whether it's being abusive, it's always going to be to get control and power over you, your emotions, and your thoughts. It's always going to be the function. So that's the key difference, right? Does that make sense?
It does. It does. I think it's still so like broad to me because, have you listened to any of like the Brianna Chicken Fry Zach Bryan?
Yeah.
So to me, the picture that she's painting, right? And we've got one side. I totally get that. We're talking about social media. We're talking about media, celeb stuff. But the side of it where she talks on her podcast about her being at the Oscars, her being in this beautiful dress that she was so happy to be in, and she felt so good. And it was one of the biggest nights of her life.
He'll ruin it.
And he found a way to ruin it.
So so let me use that as a perfect example. Whether that's why he did it or not, we don't know. But let's just go with that. Narcissists routinely ruin special occasions, job promotions, birthdays, anniversaries, holidays, knowing you have a big meeting that morning, something. They'll either ruin it by making you late, quote, losing your keys, starting an argument with you, or messing up plans on, but again, on the surface, you may not be able to call them out on it. But if you look at the function, why are they doing it? If it's to gain control and manipulate and gain power over that person in those moments, why are those moments so critical? Because those moments give this other person a sense of independence or joy or happiness. And the narcissist wants to be responsible for those emotions, even if it's making the other person happy. That's why they give them these extravagant gifts. They want to be the ones to create that emotion. So if she's in this beautiful gown at this huge event and it's a huge night for her, well, no, he, again, if this is what happened, he wants to be responsible for controlling her. And he doesn't have any control in that situation. So what's the best thing to do? Knock her down. Right? It's the example I always give is, let's say you have ironically about a dress too, but let's say you have a wedding and you bought this gorgeous dress and you were so excited to wear it. Okay. But the night before, you were on the phone with one of your friends till 1 a.m. because they're going through a divorce, and your significant other, let's say I'm using a he for right now, no one yell at me, he is a narcissist. And he doesn't like that you ignored him until 1 a.m. because he wanted to have sex, or quote, he wanted to go to bed, whatever the case may be, which has nothing to do with that. It's just, you were not providing him supply and attention. You were on the phone giving yourself to somebody else, and they view you as property. You can't give yourself to someone else. So that happens. And they don't say anything. They don't say anything. They don't bring it up. But now you're going to a wedding. You're so excited to wear this dress. You get to the wedding. You're at cocktail hour. And they, quote, accidentally spill red wine all over your dress. Okay? To anybody on the outside, that looks like an accident. And it could be an accident. But let's just say in this case it's not. It's you did that on purpose. Your friends would be like, why would they do that on purpose? That doesn't even make sense. But it does if you're a narcissist, because they ruined the one thing that you were most excited about. Why? Because they were angry that you didn't give them the attention that they are entitled to. That's a real example that really happened. And
do they know they're doing this?
Yes. It's so calculated. Yes, absolutely.
So I think there's two, right? So I believe from what I've seen that everybody who has that setup, I don't even know how to describe it. Anybody who's got, they end up with a person, you would normally think that it would be like the weak zebra with the broken leg.
It's not.
Okay. So talk about, who is it?
So it is a very big myth that narcissists go for weak, insecure human beings. They don't. And I'm going to tell you why people think that. Narcissists go for people that are smart, successful, confident, have a lot going for them, are really passionate about things. Why? Because they want to be in the presence of somebody who's, spotlight they can share and then take. It makes them look good to be with somebody that's successful and happy and outgoing and philanthropic. It makes them look good. Now, I think where the myth comes in is that the sole purpose of a narcissist is to break you down layer by layer, and it's slow and it's insidious. It's like a leaky faucet. It's drip, drip, drip. You don't pay attention to it because it's not that bad. It's just annoying. And then before you know it, you're standing in your kitchen 5 years later and there's water up to your head and you're like, how the hell did I get here? And that's what narcissistic abuse is like. So it starts out very, very slow. And the goal is to slowly strip away your sense of self and self-identity. And by the end of the relationship, what you're seeing is somebody who is now insecure, has no sense of self, has no confidence, feels totally incapable of doing anything independently, is unsure of their interests. They don't have any passions anymore because they have broken them down systematically. And this is why they go for people that are, let's say, up here, because it's more supply for them. It gives them more. They have further to fall. Whereas if they start dating somebody who is very low about themselves to begin with and has very low self-confidence, they're not going to get anything from that because there's nowhere to go. They can't bring them down any lower. And I guess they can. But so that's what you end up seeing people during the process and after the process of years of narcissistic abuse, which absolutely will strip you of your sense of self. And I think that's where the myth comes in, which is why I do so much kind of preventative medicine in a sense, telling people, don't think because you're confident and strong and you would recognize this, that you're immune to it. You're not. And this is why I teach what those red flags are.
You also, when you're like that, you would never imagine that someone could be built
No one does. Nobody does.
Right?
It's so absolutely like mind-blowing.
You're this happy-go-lucky, and you can't fathom that someone could be that smart and calculated.
Correct. And which is why it's so hard to explain. Imagine me saying to you, like, Nicki, he spilled red wine on my dress. He knew that was my favorite dress. And you say, why? And because remember, you view him as he's charming. Why would he purposely spill that? Jaime, you're overreacting. Like, come. And now,
do these narcissists know that they're narcissists? How are they getting help when they don't?
Not. Well, they don't get help. They don't get help. They don't think anything's wrong. The only time
they think you're the issue. So
no,
right?
they make you the issue, but they don't care if they don't care if things are shitty, right? Because they just use what they can to kind of get what they want. And it benefits them sometimes when the relationship is shitty, because then they can blame you and say, well, I cheated on you because you won't ever have sex with me. It's that. And so of course you don't want to have sex with them because they're abused. So it's done on purpose. Do they know they're a narcissist? Here's kind of, it depends where you are right on this continuum. But in my experience, in my professional experience, and my colleagues' experiences, I will say that if you are on this end where it's narcissistic personality disorder, and even a little bit further back, the only time a narcissist presents for treatment is either if it's court mandated, or they go to, quote, couples therapy. Because again, the couples therapy environment becomes a stage for the narcissist to charm the therapist, because some therapists aren't looking for this, right? Charm the therapist, or you're scared to death to say anything because you know you have to get in a car and drive home with them, and they're going to drive 90 miles an hour to try to scare the crap out of you, and you're going to get abused when you go home. So you're not going to say anything. So it further gaslights you. And so they don't get help. And even with, let's just say they went to get help. One or two things will happen. Either they will try to charm the therapist. And when the therapist, I mean, this has happened a million times to me, where I'll have somebody bring their spouse in, and the spouse will, start being really charming, and I hold boundaries and I don't, go there. And then there's this shift. Now they hate you. They realize it's not going to work with you. And they'll either walk out or they'll leave and never come back. Dr. Z, she doesn't know what she's talking about. She's the worst therapist. She's so stupid. She's bullshit. I mean, it's horrible. She's horrible. I'm never going back. They will go through 9 million marriage therapists on purpose until they find somebody that believes their bullshit.
Who says, oh, you need date night, or you need to be more physical with him.
So this happens to this is what I think, this was probably one of the most disturbing, I shouldn't say that.
The ball is in your court. The woman.
The therapist told her, to go on date night. And as if it's her fault, right? Well, you need to give him more attention. You need to work on the intimacy piece. And what was not being told was all of the abuse going on at home. And so now if she doesn't go on date night, she looks like the problem. And it's so confusing because you're so stripped of your self-esteem that you believe these things because you think you have no ability to judge your own character. You've been taught this narrative to not trust anybody else and that you are the problem. And that's how they gain control over you. And so do they get help? No, they don't get help. Do they think they're a narcissist? Maybe they've been told that, but they don't care. Or they think that whoever's telling them that's a moron and they're above a label anyway. Like they're going to be the narcissist. They're going to be the best narcissist. They're above a label, right? They're smarter than everybody. So even the best therapists in the world, maybe in the session with a true narcissist, maybe they get a sprinkle of change in the session. But as soon as they walk out the door, I mean, it doesn't benefit them to change. They get everything they need.
Wild. Yeah. And then talk about, are they more prone to cheating?
Oh God. Yeah. Their infidelity rates.
Yes. But why?
So I'm making a blanket statement here. No. I would be shocked if and this goes for men and women. Yeah. Narcissists have a very high rate of infidelity in all their relationships. And there's a couple reasons for that. One, they feel they're entitled to it. They're entitled to have sex. They're entitled to receive gifts from other people. They're entitled to have as many people as they want giving them attention. They deserve that. They should have that. And because they're special. So there's that. And it's a constant source of supply. So the more people they have around them, the better. I call it like their orbit. So it's like there's all these people in their orbit. And when they're when they feel that they need more supply, they'll take one person that they've shelved, and I'll talk about this in a second, take them off the shelf and put them in their orbit again until they're bored or until they're not getting what they want, and they put them back on their shelf. There's always people waiting in the wings, which is why when you're with a narcissist, if they break up with you, within days, they're with somebody else. That's not coincidence. They will never leave a relationship unless they have somebody already in the wings, because they will not be alone because there's no one to give them that supply. So there's always people in the wings. They usually have multiple relationships. And it doesn't have to be sexual. It could be, these emotional affairs and, all that stuff. But they will always have somebody waiting in the wings. So true narcissists view people as objects that they acquire for a very specific purpose. And once your purpose is served, or they don't need you in that moment, you are completely out of their orbit. You don't exist. So they'll take you out of their orbit and put you back on the shelf, make you bad, make you, lowest of the low. They don't need you. But as soon as they do need you, either they need money from you, or they want sex, or they need help, navigating some problem in their life, they'll take you back off the shelf. And this is where people pleasing comes in also, because people that want to help other people, because it's uncomfortable to them to watch other people be uncomfortable, they'll come off the shelf and help again, right? And so sometimes they don't even realize that they're in the orbit, but you're viewed as an object. And narcissists, it's almost like this. I'm not necessarily saying they don't want to hurt you, but really what happens is they'll do whatever they need to do to get what they want. And if that means in the process they have to hurt you, well, then just you're in the way.
Wow.
So it's not like a deliberate, it's they don't care who they hurt, as long as they get what they need.
I am shook right now because I feel like I'm getting this therapy session. I feel emotional.
Yeah, it's upsetting and it's jarring. It's jarring.
It's also I think for those of us strong women who don't want to admit that we've been in that cycle, I'm talking all the way back to high school.
Of course.
For me, a high school relationship.
Yep.
That I forgot about until this conversation.
Yeah.
I had to get a restraining order on somebody as a sophomore in high school.
Yes. Restraining orders are very common. Yeah.
Yep. But what I want to talk about to anybody, this is anybody. This doesn't mean you're in a divorce you're how that shapes the way you view relationships in your future. So I'm going to use an example. Wonderful guy could be in my life as a 47-year-old woman. And I remember a few years ago, I was flown out to Nashville to go on American Idol with my babysitter because we had a video go viral.
And this really
wonderful, that's a fun background.
I'll have to watch
story.
That. Okay.
Yeah, you'll have to see it. So American Idol hosted me. They flew me out, put me in a hotel, flew her out, put us in a hotel, and I was dating this wonderful man, and he was like, "I'll book a flight too." Dr. Z. He wanted to be supportive of me and just be there. I immediately was like, no, because of past relationships made me feel like he was just there to control me. He wasn't. Right. He's literally like, what is going on right now? Yeah. Are you doing something shady? Because once you're through that, you can't trust that somebody's incentive or motivation is just to literally be with you.
Yes.
So how do we get through that?
So that's I'm so glad you brought that up. It's an excellent question.
I'm feeling so much in my system right now.
So listen, most people are inherently good, right? Let's just say most people, we're talking about a very specific population now, which is very underdiagnosed, right? Because they don't present for treatment. I hear people say, well, it's only 2% of the pop. No, it's way more than that. That's just, it's not reported. Why would it be reported? Nobody even knows half the time what they're dealing with. So most people are inherently good. I want to say that first. Second, I know it sounds like I always get this too, so I'm already prepping for this. It sounds like we're bashing narcissists. And if I'm in the mental health field, how could you bash somebody? I'm not bashing. I'm simply stating behaviors that they do. If it sounds that bad, it's because it is that bad. That's number 2. Third, one of the most traumatic, I'd say, I'm just going to say it, mind fucks that my patients experience aside from the abuse that they've endured. This nugget, the moments they realize, oh my God, I have no idea who this person is. The whole relationship, none of it was real. And we could be talking 10, 20 years, doesn't have to be 6 months. None of this was real. Oh my God. You literally feel like you're finding out things like they're hundreds of dollars in debt and they've been, with prostitutes and they've been fired from their jobs you never knew. They have all these women in just things you didn't even know. It's just so deep. And so you're hit with this, oh my God, what? And your whole world is rocked and the rug is fully pulled out from under you. And that moment of realizing that everything up until this point has been a lie is the most jarring experience. And it is the most traumatic experience that people go through, who are going through this have. And because of that, and it's so jarring and it is traumatic, you then you're trying to piece this together. It feels surreal. It's like otherworldly, people describe it as. It's just, you can't even grasp it. Your whole world is fake. So then naturally, well, what else isn't? What else did I miss? Because now you don't trust yourself. You didn't trust yourself before from the gaslighting. Now you really don't trust yourself. How the hell are you going to trust anybody else? Now you don't trust your best friends because, well, now everybody sucks, right? And I can't trust anybody. And then when you have to go and not go, but if you choose to start dating, which is why I tell people wait like a year at minimum, when you choose to start dating again, I had a patient one time say, I don't think it's going to work. What? He held the door. He held the door for me. And I was like, well, what? And then she told me why holding the door for her was such a trigger. And it was because for her, if he held the door for her, he was the last one in. She couldn't get out. He would block the door so she couldn't get out. And so anytime somebody opened the door for her, she felt like it was kind of this precursor to this kind of behavior. And so everything you have to kind of unlearn. And it's scary as hell. And I tell people, listen, you may always have that knee-jerk reaction to not trust somebody. That's like almost like your emotional reflex now because it's so ingrained in you. Where the change comes in and where the healing comes in is noticing that was your reaction and then taking a mental pause, pausing in that moment. I always say the power's in the pause. You realize you responded that way, pause. Reassess the situation. What's coming up for you? Is this from past stuff that's, influencing how you're behaving now? Or is this the reality of the situation? For a long time, you may not know. And that's why it's important to be in therapy. So you can do these kind of check-ins and these groundings with people so that they can redirect you. So I can say, nope, just holding the door for you. It's just, being nice.
I don't know. And now let's rewind. I come from an amazing family of men. So before my divorce, I was very much, and I'm going to say it, and I'm probably going to feel weird saying it, I was very much a guy's girl.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. So yeah. Some of my best friends were men. Yeah. The people, when I'm down in the dumps, like bottom of the barrel, I call a male friend before I call a female friend. I don't know why. It's just how it's been in my life. So I come from strong men. It's not like I'm super close with my dad. My cousin Bill is probably like the best father and husband I've ever seen. My grandpa on my dad's side was the epitome of like lived for his wife. So when we're talking earlier about like the pandemic and deciding on relationships, I grew up with this notion that husband and wife were true partners. Mm-hmm. Right. So that's the world I come from. Mm-hmm. And now I'm at a point
which absolutely can be.
Right. But now I'm at a point at 47 years old. I'm going to be a little vulnerable here. I don't trust that a man outside of my family members really wants me to be super successful and happy in my own shit. I don't know if I believe that. So that's something I know I have to work through. So for women like me that want to shine and want to celebrate their life, like where do I go from here? Like, where do we go from here? If we really believe that men are going to want to chill us out from who we are.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that's narcissism. I'm just saying that's a feeling I have of I only can shine so much before irritating somebody. Or I can only talk about, oh my God, can you believe the podcast? Like, I'm not going to talk about work and successes all the time, but I should be able to celebrate those little successes before my four walls. So what is going to make a man feel secure enough? Is that a type of person? Is it because I think women like me are drawn to confident alpha males. So
I mean, I don't think
that a little.
Yeah, no. I think it's so important. Here's the thing. Clearly that's not all men, right? We know that, right? Clearly that's not all men. And for whatever reason, your perception and your fear,
or my type,
or your, I think it's a couple
alpha
things.
Athlete is my type. I think,
yes. And so if that alpha athlete, right, they're used to being in charge and they want to be but there's different things within a relationship that if we're talking very traditional roles here, there's different things that people can be in control of, right? Like for me, I'm like in charge of my kids' schedules, right? Like the haircuts, the doctor's appointments. Like I may not always be able to take them, but like I know when everything is, the play dates, who has what activity after school, what tournament, what competition, right? The clothes, who's wearing what. I'm in charge of that, right? And I don't want to say that's where I shine, but like that's my thing, right? Or my job, that's, where I shine, or whatever the case may be. I think you have to figure out in a marriage who is going to kind of take the lead in certain areas, which areas you're going to hold jointly, and which ones you're going to take a back seat to. And I think it's contingent on the relationship. I think we get into trouble thinking we have a type.
Yep.
And all alpha men want to be alpha and therefore need women that are not going to be alpha. And that's not true, right? Yep. Sometimes an alpha male, again, I'm using very traditional terms here, wants an alpha female. I mean, I don't think we can go by those stereotypes. I think it's really relationship specific. And keep in mind, you can be one way with one person and the dynamic of the relationship is this way. And then you pair up with somebody else and their way kind of shifts your way a little bit. And so you're different. You're still you, but you're different based on what the other on this give and take. And that's why each relationship's unique. I don't think it's a man thing that they don't want women to be successful or they always want to be ahead of the female. I think that if you're dealing with that, and this is again my opinion, I think it's more of an individual thing. It's more of how they view themselves in relation to other women. Did they feel insecure? Did they have a mom that stayed home that didn't work? Was it her job to take care of the house? Which there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
But if that's not you, then there's going to be an issue, not because they don't want you to get ahead, but because that's not what they're used to. That's not what they're familiar with. It doesn't mean it's bad.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, this is when, if somebody shifts, if you stay home for 20 years taking care of your kids, and then you decide you want to go back to law school and become an attorney, I mean, your significant other, you would think would be excited because it's something you want to do. And they very well may be.
Right.
And at the same time, you just told them in one way or another, I'm going to need you to take on some other roles and I'm going to have to take a back seat.
Yeah.
And they may agree, and that's growing together, or they may not, but it doesn't make them an asshole. It makes them uncomfortable.
Okay. Yeah. So I guess the question is more, what do you say to women who have come out of this, like the narcissistic abuse, right? What work do they have to do before they can be in another loving, or if they want to pursue a loving relationship? Like there's a lot of work there.
Yeah. So when people come out, one of the things they always say to me is, how do I get back to who I was? Because who they were in the beginning is not who they are now. And I tell them you can't. And I pause because I want them to understand that. Asking somebody to move forward in life and ignore and not incorporate the trauma that has happened to them is not only impossible neurologically and cognitively, But it's so goddamn invalidating. I know people don't want to think about it, but it's invalidating as hell. And so what I tell people is, take 9/11, for example, right? 9/11, we remember exactly where we were when it happened. We knew people that were involved. I mean, all of this. It's like saying to you, I need you to move on as the person you were. Let's say you lost, as the person you were before 9/11. You can't. Right? You can move on alongside with it. You don't forget it. You can't take it out of your brain. It's already sitting on the outside because it can't even incorporate itself because it's so just beyond comprehension. But you're never the same. And so once people realize, there's this weird relief that happens when somebody realizes they don't have to struggle to get back to who they were, because that's a battle. Because you already have this experience. You have to learn to live with the experience. And so what you get from that, I'll have people say, I wasted 10 years of my life. I wasted 20 years of my life. No. Now you have learned so many skills and you're so aware, right? Maybe too aware. We have to bring you back to the middle because you're so hyper vigilant that you're misinterpreting very benign events or very, very benign behaviors as narcissistic. And controlling when they're not. So what I tell people to do is don't date. I say a year if you can. Don't date for a year. You have to be in therapy. Reconnect with people that you definitely were isolated from and lost touch from, because when you're dating, you're going to need people around you. It doesn't have to be a therapist to check in with, to ground you. Like the opening the door example. So you have somebody say to you, no, that's not. One isolated behavior by itself does not define a narcissist, especially something like that. Which is why the red wine story I said makes no sense to anybody else. But if that opening the door thing is also in the context of a million other things with the same function of trapping you and controlling you, that's different. So you have to have people remind you this is an isolated event and keep you focused and keep you grounded, but at the same time, validate and respect and identify that you have been through hell. And I think that's important.
So I mean, I love all this. I feel like I'm learning so much from you on all the curiosities I've had about the dynamics and coming out the other side. And, whether you've been emotionally controlled, gaslight, all these terms, you've got to work through it. I do feel like I see a lot of people, whether it's in my real life or online, that are stuck to that abuse being their entire persona now. They're posting the memes and they're posting the passive aggressive reposting things that are like what they're going through. Is that therapeutic or is that?
So I think it's therapeutic to a point. There comes a point where continuing to take in information and signs like, oh my God, that's what I went through. That's what I went through. And constantly finding things that you can relate to, I think is helpful to a point. Where I think it starts to become ineffective and actually work against you is when you're continuously taking in information as a way to avoid actually sitting with the discomfort and working on it. Right? Posting a meme, fine. But that's not doing any work for you. And so I think to a point, I think it's helpful. It's validating, people are supporting you and that's great. But if that's the only way you're doing that, you're avoiding your own discomfort and you need to stop taking in information. You don't need any more knowledge. Anyone who's gone through narcissistic abuse is an absolute expert in it. Period.
See, the field hockey coach in me wants to be like, stop doing this, move on, get your life, focus on your life, stop
focus on
the cry for help.
Focus on you. Now, I think, but I don't necessarily think it's a cry for help. I think it's an avoidance strategy that as long as I'm reading about narcissism, as long as I'm posting about narcissism, I'm working on it.
Okay, that's interesting.
But you're not. You're not doing anything inward. You're not sitting with anything. I would actually tell that person, I want you to, you can go on social media, but I don't want you to post or go to any sites on narcissistic personality disorder.
Because then your whole algorithm is there, literally.
Right. That too.
I had to clear my cache on TikTok a bunch of times because I was like, I went through divorce. I don't want to go through it again emotionally. I'm clearing out anything divorce.
And that's what I would tell them to do, because it becomes it becomes avoidant.
Yeah. The same thing with like, people that are going through infertility tend to do the same thing, right? They're just constantly reminding themselves of that. And I think there's a point where there's connection through social media, and then there's just this pounding away at our mental health.
Yes, exactly. I think to a point it's helpful. You get support, you feel validated. I think once it serves as a way to not feel your own pain, then the function of it is no different than drinking.
Yeah. That's why I'm a huge advocate for getting on the right side of social media, getting your algorithm right for self-growth.
My block list is, I can't, I mean, the messages I get, the hate, oh my goodness. It's torture. I mean, you really have to have a thick skin.
Listen, the times that I've considered just sticking to comedy, because it's so much easier to just be funny and have these very dumb, funny moments, it's way easier.
You'll still get it.
But when you know what though? When there's a grown man that's like, oh, grown woman acting like this, that comment doesn't bother me. But when it comes to me talking about divorce implications or co-parent, I take that shit way seriously.
Yes.
And so to have a grown man come in and be like, well, you should have stayed married. You've made a vow. I'm like,
Yep.
It's, you have to really have a thick skin before you're posting on social.
I mean, I agree. I agree. And it's not, it's not easy. It sounds like it would be fun. It's not easy. And it's really emotionally, taxing. I mean, it's great because you're getting your stuff out there, you're helping people. And that is, that's a great thing that feels good, but there's a whole other side to it. That's a whole other conversation, the whole dark side of social media. Oh my goodness.
Oh yes. Yes.
All right. Well, Nicki, this was excellent. This was, I could talk to you for hours about this. I will post this. We're going to post this on YouTube as well, so people can watch. I'll post, all your links and everything so people can find you. But just for the people listening, where can they find you and your amazing Instagram and social media platform?
Literally everywhere, every platform. So I'm Nicki Marie Inc. NICKIMARIEINC. Pretty much you Google that and you'll find me. TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, everywhere. And you know what's funny? If you Google me, guess what the first thing that comes up that people are searching the most?
What?
Nicki Marie, reason for divorce. Nicki Marie, ex-husband. People are obsessed with wanting to know the deal, and I will never give it because I have children and I want their world to be offline, as much offline as possible. That's for me to do the work through. That's for us to do the work through. So I want to say that as a reminder to women who think they have to tell their full life story online. It's there forever. You don't. Do the work with the Dr. Z behind the scenes.
Yeah. I think that's the healthiest thing. I love that. It's a boundary.
I'm constantly thinking of my kids' future, and I'm not perfect with it, but I'm constantly trying. It's like on the forefront of everything.
It makes you a good mom.
Oh,
period.
It's hard.
Well, it's not, nothing's easy, but but I mean, that's just the concern you have just shows that you're
I see women who are just hurt by their, cheating ex-husband.
Yeah.
And they're putting it out there for millions to see. And these kids are going to grow up and go, oh my God, my mom aired, like my dad's cheating online. Like, can you imagine in 10 years where we're going to be with this?
No, it's interesting you say that. I was talking about that with somebody because I'm, as are you, in that generation where we were born into a world. There was no internet. There was no cell phones. There was no nothing. There was none of it. Like my son can't wrap his brain around it. He's like, how'd you order from Amazon if there was no internet? I'm like,
correct.
I'm like, we didn't. We went to a store. So this didn't come into our lives. You're same age as you. This didn't come into our lives until we were out of college. So like we didn't have any of this stuff in high school and college. So our lives were completely different. And so I can't fathom. Like my parents got divorced and it was not pretty. And so I can't imagine them posting on social media what they were going through.
No, I can't even. But I also
think it's more acceptable now to do. So I think society's perception of it, I think, shifted along with it. I'm thinking of it in terms of back then, it would have been like, oh my God, no one talked about anything.
Well, like even when someone comes up to me in Target with my kids there and they're like, oh my God, your mom's the best. You know, I feel so bad for my kids because if my mom were on social and getting all this attention, I'd be like, ew, okay. So it's just, we're trying.
I mean, the other day, one of my I didn't realize I didn't have him blocked. One of my kids saw one of my videos on TikTok and they're like, you're on TikTok? I'm like, oh. So I had to block. And I mean, it's just, it's a whole different world. But you know what, you as long as the intentions are good, and which they are, you do the best you can, right? Like you just do the best you can. That's it. And that's all, right? Yes. Like some days are just going to be better than others. And that's it.
Right. Right. Well, thank you for having me. This was fun.
This was great. We'll definitely do this again because I could talk to you for hours, but thank you so much. And thank you for sharing and for being here. And we will definitely talk soon.
Yes.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Next Up Narcissism. I hope you found it useful, but most importantly, I hope you found it validating. Want to work one-on-one with me? Visit my website at drjamiezuckerman.com to book a personalized coaching session, and be sure to check out my on-demand workshops on topics like co-parenting with a narcissist, life after leaving, anxiety management strategies, and more. Again, that's drjamiezuckerman.com. You'll also find links to my interactive workbooks, merchandise, resources, and newsletter sign up. Next Up Narcissism is as much your podcast as it is mine. I want to hear your feedback and what you want to hear. So make sure to leave a podcast review wherever you listen, or send an email to nextup@drjamiezuckerman.com. Again, that's nextup@drjamiezuckerman.com. Be sure to subscribe so that you never miss an episode. And as always, thank you so much for listening. Make sure to tune in next week to see what's up next on Next Up Narcissism.